Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Good Cop, Bad Cop from Overworld Games. This is a social deduction team-based game. Does that sound familiar? Well, that's because there seems to be more and more of those lately. It started with Werewolf, and which was maybe even still to this day the most known one, but its close runner-up, which will probably surpass it eventually, is The Resistance. And Good Cop, Bad Cop is in that same vein, but it does have some pretty significant differences. First off is in the theme. This is all about a police department which has been infiltrated by crooked cops. Specifically, the kingpin of the crime organization himself has decided to slum it with his goons, I guess, and has actually infiltrated the police department as well. And there is one of the cops who is actually the agent. I guess it's like an FBI agent who's helping out the cops, but is trying to maintain their cover. So you're not, but the whole goal of the game is that you're on two teams. You're the crooked cops and the honest cops. The honest cops want to kill the kingpin. The kingpin and his crooked cops want to kill the agent, but of course, like any good social deduction game, nobody knows who anyone is. The trick here is not just that, unlike the Resistance, you can just grab guns and shoot people, but everyone gets 3 identity cards, and whatever you have the most of is what you are. If you have the most honest cop cards, you're an honest cop. If you have the most crooked cop cards, you're a crooked cop. But if you're the kingpin, you're just crooked, no matter what your other cards are. If you're the agent, you're just good, no matter what your other cards are. I just explained 90% of the game, but I'm still going to take you through a brief overview of some of the other elements. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Good Cop, Bad Cop. This is a competitive deduction game for 4 to 8 players, and it's a team-based game. So one team of players are going to be the honest cops, the other team of players are going to be the crooked cops. The honest cops are led by the agent, the crooked cops are led by the kingpin, and your goal is to knock out the other team's leader, either the kingpin or the agent, depending on what team that you're on. Now, the setup of the game is a bit variable depending on the number of players. So the honest cops and the crooked cops are the most common cards in the game, and up in the top corner of each of these cards, and also the gun cards, are going to be the player counts of when these cards will actually be used. So you'll set up the deck, and the way you're going to set up the deck is you'll take the agent and the kingpin card, which I already set up out here, so I'll show you that in a minute once we go through how to describe the game. You'll take the agent and the kingpin card, set those aside. You'll shuffle up however many applicable cards you're going to be playing with based on the number of players. You're going to deal one card. Let's say that this is the setup for a 5-player game. So you have the agent and the kingpin, shuffle up all the other integrity cards, deal 3 of those into that stack. Then from all the remaining cards, deal 2 cards out to every player that's in the game. 1 card will be left over. That goes back in the box unseen. Then those remaining 5 cards will be shuffled up and then dealt out to each player so that each player has 3 integrity cards face down in front of them. Whew! Okay, that's the main setup. The end result is that you'll have these 3 integrity cards. I just like to call them identity cards. And those are going to determine what you are, what team that you're on. You can look at them at any time, but the rest of the players in the game don't know what team you're on. They're not going to know who you're working for, and they must use their actions during the course of the game in order to find that out. Now, how this works is that if the majority of your cards are honest cop cards, you're an honest cop. So let's go ahead and just, I'm going to cheat and look at this guy's cards. We have a crooked cop, we have a honest cop, and we have another crooked cop. So that's a good example. This player is a crooked cop. All right? Doesn't matter what this other card is. Well, hold on. We're jumping ahead, but that player is now a crooked cop. If it was 2 honest and a crooked, that player would be an honest cop. So that's an easy example. But things get a little bit different with the agent or the kingpin. If you're the agent or the kingpin, if one of your cards is the agent, let's just go ahead and find that individual actually. There we go. Here we have a crooked cop. Here we have an honest cop. But the other card is the kingpin. Now, this is the person who the honest cops are trying to take out. But you don't, it doesn't matter what these other cards are. You may look at those other players' cards. The kingpin means you're working for the crooked cops team. So let's take a look and see if we can find the agent. The agent is right there. So the agent also Doesn't matter what the other cards are that are face down in her area. Even if she had 2 crooked cards with her, she would still be considered on the honest cop team. So that's another way to throw off the other team even more. Now, what's going to happen on your turn? First off, this is kind of annoying, but whoever is the current player is supposed to take the lead investigator card, which is also the only rules reminder, the only turn order cheat sheet in the game. But in any case, you get 1 action on your turn. The first thing you can do is investigate. That is very simply looking at another player's face-down card. There is no restriction on this. You can look at any player's card. You can look at a different card than you looked at last time. You can look at the same card. You can look at a card that someone else just looked at in order to confirm their suspicions if they said anything about it. And that's the thing. Once you look at that card, you may say whatever you want about it or say nothing at all. That's another aspect of the game. Once you look at it, your turn is over, it goes to the next player. The other type of action you can take is equip. Now, every player is going to start with one of these equipment cards, and these give you special one-time effects that you can use whenever they apply. The flashbang lets you shuffle up all of your integrity cards in front of you, look at them, and then put them face down, because once you get your integrity cards, you can look at them, but you must not switch their order, because remember, players are going to be constantly looking at them, and they need to know which ones they've already looked at. The metal detector, you can investigate each player who's holding a gun. Coffee, after the current turn ends, play moves immediately to your turn. Hold on, there's one specific card I wanted to show you. Here we go. The restraining order. When used when a player shoots their gun, they must choose a different player and immediately aim at that player and shoot them instead. So these have very powerful effects, and you'll all start off with one of them. But if you want to get more during the course of the game, you're going to have to use an action just to take an equipment card. The downside is that then you must immediately flip over one of your integrity cards, giving the other players a little more information, but that's the price you pay for getting a powerful, potentially powerful item. The third type of thing you can do is arm yourself with a gun from the center of the table. Now, you'll notice there's only 3 guns here. Well, just like with the integrity cards, you only have a certain number of guns per the amount of players. So you're never going to have as many as the number of players that there are, so they are in limited quantity for a reason. Now, much like with taking an equipment card, when you take a gun, you must flip over one of your integrity cards. So now, what is this person? Crooked and honest. Oh, what are they? And when you take the gun, and only when you have a gun with you, the second you go to the second part of your turn, you don't have a second part of your turn if you're taking any of the other actions. The second part of your turn is to aim it. So when you take the gun, you'll immediately aim it, but that's all that you'll do. So I say, I don't trust this guy, and aim the gun that way. Now, when your turn comes around again, you may take the last type of action in the game, which is shooting. Very simply, wherever you have the gun aimed, you decide to use your action to shoot. If you shoot a normal, one of the normal people, they flip over all their cards and they are out of the game. They are completely eliminated. I just killed an honest cop because there are 2 honest cards there. But just because you have a gun doesn't mean you have to shoot. If you learn more information between when you took the gun and aimed it and when your turn comes around again, you may decide, I'm not going to shoot. I'll do something else. I'll investigate. I'll take an equipment card. I'll do whatever. I just don't want to shoot right now. And then the second part of your turn, you can re-aim the gun if you want. And I'm going to kill this person instead. Now, this is interesting because this is the agent. So let's say that I did decide to re-aim, or I originally aimed at this player instead. And this person happens to be the agent. Well, they don't die right away. The agent and the kingpin have, let's say, 2 hit points. Let's call it that way. They reveal all of their cards showing that they are the agent or the kingpin. And then they take one of these wound cards. A wound card basically says you're on death's door, you can only take 1 more hit, but in exchange for that, you also get to draw an equipment card from the deck. So it could be your saving grace. But at that point, now the people are going to start, whoever's still left in the game is going to start showing their true colors. They're going to start either trying to protect the agent by killing the other players, or trying to kill the kingpin, or everyone take aim at the agent and try to finish that person off, or the kingpin if that had been the way that it worked out. And that's really the game. You are trying to kill the other opponent, the other team's agent or kingpin, depending on what side that you're on, and try to protect the other players as well, because the more the merrier. And the way that the cards are distributed, you most likely will not have an even amount of players. So for instance, in this game, we had only 2 bad guys, the Kingpin and the Crooked Cop here, and 3 good guys, the Agent and 2 other honest cops. So you're not going to have even games, and I believe it's even possible to only have 1 player on a team, or even in a game with up to 7 or 8 players, only have a couple of players on a team. That's just the way the game shakes out. That's good cop, bad cop. Now, let's get to my final review. My final thoughts. Final review thoughts. Well, there's not much to speak of as far as the components or the theme in this game. I mean, I never felt like I was a police officer, and the cards are fine. I'm not a huge fan of the artwork, but it's not like you're going to be staring at it much anyways, like social deduction games. Like, I would never say that The Resistance was a gorgeous game. It's just not the case. And I'm sorry that I have to keep comparing this game to The Resistance, but how could I not? Although, I have heard that the game this should be compared most to is a very little-known game over here in North America called Mayday Mayday, which has not seen a wider release outside of Europe, but that has the same mechanic of having 3 identity cards in front of you. That one's all about trying to get into the cockpit of an airplane. I don't know. It seemed very weird, but anyways, there's a ton of social deduction games like this. But I do think that as far as just the ones that I've played, Good Cop, Bad Cop does set itself apart pretty significantly, and it is just because of that 3 identity card mechanic. Well, not just about that though, but also the idea of having the guns, because it gives you ultimate control over other players' fates, and it also keeps the games very, very short. If I was going to say that there's a problem with The Resistance, I mean, I guess there's a few problems. I love the game, whatever version of it is, but it can go on too long. Especially the more players you have, the more likely you're just going to devolve into shouting at each other. And I have seen turns of that game where someone's just trying to pick who's going out on the team that go on for 20 minutes. I'm not joking. It's awful. Despite how great that game can be. That doesn't really happen in Good Cop, Bad Cop, because there are some circumstances where you just don't want to say anything. It behooves you not to. You have total control over the game of whose cards that you see and who you decide to aim at, and then who you decide to shoot if it gets back around to you. And you have equipment cards that, in my opinion, are much, much better than the cards, the plot cards from the base game of The Resistance. I mean, so it feels very, very different in that regard. I was surprised at how different that it felt. It could only take you a couple of turns to get perfect information about someone, almost, because of the Kingpin and Agent dynamic. You could see 2 people's card, or the 2 cards of one person, and be like, oh well, they're honest or they're crooked for sure. But maybe not. That means you have to see that 3rd card, but by then, other players might be doing something else. Someone else has probably already decided, well, I'm just going to shoot that person since they know too much about me. And then there's equipment cards that totally shake things up. Play a flashbang grenade, shuffle all your cards up. Well, now which card are you going to look at? So things like that. And while that may seem like total randomness, again, this is still a deduction game. You are trying to get evidence, and that evidence is going to determine what decisions you make. It's not totally random. So the thing about this game, though, is that I've played it probably 5 times, maybe even 6 times, because it's very fast. I can't even remember how many times I've played it completely. And I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about it, because it's a good game. I'll say that right out. It is a good game. Is it a great game? I don't know, because I don't know if there's, how do I say this? I don't know if there's enough excitement here. Part of the reason I like other types of games, whether it's Werewolf Resistance or what have you, or even Bloodbound, which actually is very similar to this as well, is that one of the reasons I like those is because there is a lot of excitement. At least it feels that way to me. This game, it can be very, very methodical because of maybe the lack of randomness and the lack of just shouting at people. In the sense, and you could just, like I said, a lot of times it behooves you not to say anything, which means you can be sitting there and someone asks you a question, and you can be just like, I don't know. You could say, someone can ask you, are you an honest cop or a crooked cop? And I just be like, I don't know, why don't you look at my card and you tell me. And that doesn't mean that they're a bad guy or they're against you. It just means that it doesn't make sense for them to speak. That can feel kind of, I don't know if anticlimactic is the word. It can just kind of bring the excitement level down. And it's weird to play a game like this and for everyone to just sort of be quiet and just silently look at cards and silently not just be silent, which is kind of weird. But having said that, I do like the idea of grabbing the gun, having to aim it, and the whole tension of there being like that whole round where that player who the gun is aimed at is like, What do I do? I'm going to die. If I'm not the agent of the Kingpin, I'm going to die. I need to either do something to convince that player not to shoot me when their turn comes back around again, or hope that I get an equipment card that can fix that, or hope that someone else on my team realizes that I'm on their team and decides to try to help me. Or maybe I'm the agent or the Kingpin, and you know what? I'll take that hit because I want people to know who I am, and we already have the edge. And do we have the edge? Because that's another interesting aspect of the game, is that you don't know how many players of each team there are. That's a huge random element in the game, actually, because in Resistance, you know exactly how many spies there are for how many number of players. In this game, you could be the... It's very, very rare. You could be the only person on your team. I think that's possible. We kind of did the math on that the last game that we played. Or at the very least, you could be in like a 2 to 6 player, or I'm sorry, a 5 or 6 player game, and be 2 players on the team, which can be very, very odd. But it is interesting, that's for sure, because you're not even going to know that until a certain degree, and even if you know that, the opposing team might not know that. So there's a lot of interesting stuff here. A lot of interesting stuff. I don't know if it's going to stand the test of time compared to those other games I've mentioned. There's just something kind of timeless about the Resistance for our group, I guess, despite the fact it's only been a few years. But we can just not play that game for a while and be like, oh, maybe the Resistance isn't as good, as we don't like it as much. And then we pull out the Resistance and play like 5 games in a row, and it's incredible. I don't know if this game is going to be like that because it is so kind of sedate and straightforward and it's just not like a stand up out of your seat and yell type of thing. And I don't think you should go into this game with that mindset. But if you don't like all the screaming and shouting and total like randomness at times of, fine, I give up. You're on the team, you're on the team, you're on the team. Let's vote. If you hate that aspect of the Resistance, consider giving this one a try, because the deductive elements, the neat, very straightforward mechanics might be right up your alley. I, for one, I'm going to hold on to it, play it even more, play it with different groups of people, see the kind of reactions that I get, and decide, maybe in a year I'll come back and revisit it and decide whether or not this replaces other games like Werewolf for the Resistance, or is just another game to sit alongside it, or is on its way out. Time will tell. That's just the kind of game this is, but it's definitely very neat. I like the mechanics, and you should give it a try. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.